3 minutes to pour out their hearts. 3 minutes to embrace and kiss. 3 minutes to undress and comfort each other. I glanced at my watch. 10 minutes had passed. By now, they should be in bed, right? At this moment, I had to admire myself. Finding out that my boyfriend was with his female boss in a hotel room, and yet I remained so calm. I disguised myself as a hotel staff member delivering room service and successfully knocked on their door.
Opening the door, shirtless and in briefs, Emily? What are you doing here?
Michael was tall, quite handsome, with captivating eyes that could steal your soul. When he looked at you quietly, it felt deeply affectionate. At that moment, he was shirtless, wearing only a pair of briefs. I gave him a once-over. Full of vigor. No wonder he looked annoyed at being interrupted. But that annoyance quickly turned into shock and panic within 2 seconds of seeing me.
Room service. I thought you might need some refreshments.
Emily, this isn't what it looks like.
I stepped inside, pushing the cart with the tray of food. The room was dimly lit, and I could see movement near the bed.
Michael, who is it?
His female boss, Amanda, emerged from the shadows, wrapping a robe tightly around herself. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw me.
Emily, oh, this is awkward.
Awkward isn't the word I would use, Amanda.
Emily, please let me explain.
Oh, I'm all ears. But first, let's make sure our guest is comfortable. Amanda, would you like some wine?
I poured a glass of wine and handed it to Amanda, who took it with trembling hands. Michael looked like he was about to explode, but was trying to keep his composure.
Emily, we didn't mean to hurt you. This just happened. It was a mistake, Emily. I swear, it didn't mean anything.
A mistake that took 10 minutes? Interesting.
I could see the guilt and fear in Michael's eyes. Amanda looked down, unable to meet my gaze.
Well, enjoy your evening. I think I've seen enough.
I turned and left the room, leaving them to their guilt and confusion. Emily Davis sneezed. The room was filled with tension as Emily's anger boiled over. Her face twisted with disgust, and she took a step forward, yanking the blanket off Sarah Brown.
Since you've already lost all sense of shame, why bother covering up? What is it? Flat, as a board both front and back, can't bear to look. Huh?
Sarah was caught off guard. She instinctively reached for the blanket, but Emily was quicker. The blanket hit the floor, and Emily stepped on it as she closed in on Sarah.
You're really something, aren't you? Always making moves on other people's boyfriends. Is it because you're too unattractive for any man to want you?
Sarah, unfazed by the missing blanket, leaned against the headboard with a lazy grace. She picked up a pack of cigarettes and lit one, a victorious smile playing on her lips.
I know you're hurt, angry, and unwilling to accept this, but people need to have some self-awareness. You can't give him anything. If he stays with you, he'll be stuck in a rented room, living a life of uncertainty. But I can elevate him to great heights. How can you possibly compare to me?
Emily's fury propelled her forward, faster than she thought possible. Even Sarah's smug demeanor faltered as Emily's hand landed heavily on her face, the sound echoing in the room.
How can the company have such a shameless woman like you?
Sarah, enraged, straightened up from her relaxed position.
Emily Davis, are you crazy? How dare you hit me?
A shameless woman like you deserves to be dealt with. I just can't understand how your mother gave birth to such a hybrid like you.
Before Emily could continue, a strong arm wrapped around her waist, dragging her away from the headboard. It was Michael Smith. Emily broke free from his grip and slapped him across the face.
Michael Smith, don't you dare touch me. These 3 years, I must have been blind.
Michael, humiliated and furious, grabbed Emily's collar.
Emily Davis, don't push your luck. If it weren't for these 3 years of feelings, I would have left you long ago. Look at you, how can you match up to me? If you know what's good for you, leave now, or we'll break up right here.
Ha! A cheating scumbag like you. Do you really think you're something special? If you're leaving, then get lost and stay far away from me.
Michael, clearly not expecting Emily's defiance, stammered.
Fine. Don't regret this. Let's see who else would want you besides me.
Emily sneered, her voice dripping with contempt.
That's none of your concern. My prospects are just fine. And
She leaned in close, her voice deadly calm.
I'll be waiting for the day you come crawling back to me.
The bar was dimly lit, filled with the hum of conversations and clinking glasses. I sat alone, nursing my drink, lost in thought.
Muttering to herself, "Why am I even sad over a jerk like him?"
The more I drank, the deeper my sorrow and anger grew. I couldn't shake off the memories of our past.
Sighing, we met in my freshman year. He was a year ahead, so charming, so persistent.
For 2 years, he pursued me relentlessly. We were together for 3 years, 5 years in total.
Bitterly, when we graduated, he struggled to find a job. I used my dad's connections to get him into MK Company.
I never imagined he'd betray me within a year with Sarah Brown.
Angrily, the man who once declared his love for me on the school's confession wall, who carried me up 8 flights of stairs to the hospital.
He had changed. He was now opportunistic, selfish, and unfaithful.
Tears streaming, he called me poor, said I wasn't good enough for him. If it weren't for me, he'd still be wandering the streets.
In my rage, I slammed the glass down, shattering it. The noise drew everyone's attention, but I didn't care. My head spun as if I had turned in circles 100 times.
Slumping over the bar, Michael Smith, I'll show you tonight.
A man walked towards me. He was tall, with long legs and sharp features, exuding an intimidating aura.
Trying to stand, I'll show you.
My legs, too drunk to obey, gave out, and I started to fall.
Panicking, oh no!
Instead of hitting the ground, I landed in a man's arms.
Giggling foolishly. Hey there, you look really comfortable to sleep on.
The fresh scent filled my nose, incredibly pleasant. I opened my bleary eyes and saw it was the handsome guy from before. The next day, as soon as she woke up, a splitting headache greeted her, as if someone had hammered her head. She knew it was the result of a hangover. But where was she? A hotel. She had drunk too much last night and had no recollection of what happened afterward.
Groggily, where am I?
Just as she was trying to remember, she felt an arm wrapped around her waist. Instinctively, she looked over. A naked man was sleeping beside her. Her eyes widened in shock. Wasn't this the handsome guy she met at the bar last night? Did she really sleep with him?
Whispering to herself, oh my God, did I really sleep with a stranger?
She hurriedly lifted the blanket to take a look. Great. Not a stitch of clothing. Panic surged within her. Although she often talked boldly, she had never done anything so outrageous. The only thought in her mind was to leave this place as quickly as possible.
Whispering to herself, I need to get out of here before he wakes up. If Dad finds out, he will definitely be furious.
She gently removed his arm from around her, quietly got out of bed, put on her clothes, and ran out. Her speed was akin to those women who leave right after a fling. Emily Davis returned to the apartment she shared with Michael Smith. Everything was just as she had left it, indicating that Michael hadn't come back last night either. She sighed, changing clothes and quickly freshening up before heading to the office. Upon entering the office, Emily felt various gazes on her, some sympathetic, some surprised, and others whispering with a hint of schadenfreude. Confused, She walked to her desk and found her belongings already packed up.
Emily, did you offend Ms. Brown? She said she wants to let you go.
Really taking advantage of her position. Isn't she? What else did she say?
Not much, just mentioned that your boyfriend seems to have been promoted to engineering manager.
Isn't Mr. Johnson the engineering manager?
He got transferred to the marketing department.
Speechless, Emily picked up the box with her things and headed straight to Sarah Brown's office. Reaching the door, she didn't hesitate and kicked it open. The loud bang drew the attention of her colleagues. Sarah's face darkened.
Emily Davis, if you keep acting crazy, I'll have you thrown out.
My performance during the probation period has been top-notch. On what grounds are you firing me?
Performance is evaluated on multiple aspects, including conduct and attitude. Your attitude towards your superiors is poor, so you don't qualify.
You, a homewrecker who seduces other people's boyfriends, have the nerve to talk to me about conduct?
At that moment, Michael Smith walked in and closed the door behind him, his eyes full of panic.
Ha! Wearing custom-tailored suits doesn't make you any less of a scoundrel.
Emily, do you have to make this public? Do you know how hard it was for me to get this job? Can't you think about me for once?
Yeah, without me, what are you?
Emily turned her disdainful gaze back to Sarah.
I thought you were just using your position to flirt with young guys. Turns out I overestimated you. Him, you made him engineering manager? Are you out of your mind? Besides charming you, what else can he do?
Hearing this, Michael, who had been relatively calm, grabbed Emily's wrist, his face full of barely contained anger.
Emily, enough is enough. Who are you to criticize Ms. Brown's decisions? She's way better than you.
Don't touch me. You disgust me.
Perhaps scared by her outburst or feeling a bit guilty, Michael let go of her hand. Emily shot them a fierce glare and walked out. In the evening, my dad called me home for dinner.
Come home, we need to talk.
I guessed that the news of my dismissal from a company must have reached his ears. Dad's health hasn't been great these past 2 years, so he handed over the company to professional managers and rarely goes there himself. But he knows everything that happens in the company. At home, the old man didn't take long to get the truth out of me.
So, what happened at work?
I thought he was going to scold me again. He didn't approve when I first started dating Michael Smith. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to hide my identity while dating him.
I told you Michael Smith was unreliable. I asked you to conceal our wealth and observe him for a year. And look what happened.
Seeing my tearful eyes, the old man glared at me, disappointed.
Look at you, so pathetic. What's there to be sad about with a guy like that? He's deceitful, calculating, reckless, and irresponsible. He even needed your help with his resume. What can he achieve? Leaving him is like escaping a nightmare.
I didn't want to argue with him about this. I clung to his arm and pouted.
What's the point of saying this now? Your daughter is being mistreated. You should fire them immediately.
That's not possible. Sarah Brown, as the company director, is quite capable. It would be a pity to fire her.
I was furious.
So you're just going to watch them mistreat me and do nothing?
The old man glanced at me and smiled.
It's not impossible to fire them, but you have to go on a blind date. If you two can be together, Dad will make you the CEO of the company and let you deal with those two yourself.
Hearing this, my eyes lit up.
Really?
Of course, holding my hand with a look full of affection. Go on, this is someone Dad picked for you.
The next day, armed with the old man's address, I went to table number 6 at the cafe. The man sitting there had his back to me, dressed in a dark suit, his posture straight and composed. His short hair added to his neat and clean look as sunlight bathed him in a golden glow.
Smiling, hello, are you Mr. Johnson?
The man looked up at my words, and the moment our eyes met,
Shocked you.
Smiling, Miss Davis, we meet again.
I was speechless, my mind in turmoil. This was the man I had spent the night with 2 days ago. How could he be here? I turned to leave immediately, realizing the old man was even less reliable than I thought. But before I could take more than a couple steps, he grabbed my arm.
Smiling, Miss Davis, are you just going to walk away after everything?
Angry, you took advantage of me when I was inebriated.
Furrowing eyebrows, how did I take advantage of you? You were the one who said I looked good to sleep with, forcibly kissed me, and then?
Covering his mouth. If you dare to spout nonsense again, I'll hit you.
Surprisingly, he nodded cooperatively. I watched him warily and slowly released my hand.
Smiling, sit down, otherwise, how will you explain this to your dad?
I thought about it and realized he was right. After all, I still wanted to exact my revenge personally. I sat across from him and got straight to the point.
Tell me, how do you know my dad and how did you win him over?
Deep eyes, I first met your dad 15 years ago. The most recent time was yesterday.
Stunned. You're not going to use what happened between us to pressure my dad into making me be with you, are you?
Speechless. I'm not that despicable.
Skeptical. Then why does my dad insist on me marrying you?
He suddenly smiled, like snow melting, bringing a touch of warmth and affection.
Maybe he thinks I'm a decent person.
Disbelief. A guy who takes advantage of others, decent? You took advantage of me when I was inebriated. Were you inebriated too? You just took advantage of me.
The conversation hung in the air, filled with tension and unresolved questions. He was rendered speechless by my unreasonable behavior.
Lowering his eyes and smiling, well, isn't it that I want to take responsibility for you?
His words confirmed my suspicion that he was using this situation to threaten me.
Jerk. Who wants you to take responsibility? Stands up to leave.
So, you don't want revenge anymore?
Hearing this, I stopped in my tracks and looked at him in disbelief.
Even the old man told you about this?
Revenge is something that needs to be done personally to be satisfying. So, Miss Davis, you need my help, don't you?
My mind raced, and I finally stopped doubting that the old man had been pressured by him. But I still couldn't understand what this man was up to.
Just say what you want.
Sit down, and we'll talk.
I reluctantly sat back down.
My name is David Miller. You can call me David.
David Miller. The name sounded familiar, like I'd heard it somewhere before. But before I could remember, he continued.
I fell in love with you at first sight, Miss Davis, and I think we are very compatible. Since your dad's condition for you joining the company is to be with me, and your condition for revenge is to join the company, why don't we follow your dad's wishes? It would also put his mind at ease.
You mean you want me to marry you?
If you feel pressured, we can just get the marriage certificate first and develop our relationship slowly. I promise not to cross any boundaries until you agree.
I was stunned, not expecting him to say such a thing. My anger visibly subsided.
What if we can't develop feelings for each other?
If, after 6 months, you still don't love me, I'll let you go without any entanglement.
And what's in it for you?
The benefit is, what if you do fall in love with me?
He looked at me with a smile, his deep eyes like an ancient well with a magnetic pull, making it easy to get lost in them. He really did have a bit of a devastating charm. I instinctively avoided his gaze and cleared my throat.
So, when do we get the certificate?
Any time.
3 days later, David Miller and I obtained our marriage certificate. It was an impulsive decision that brought great joy to the old man.
Come over for dinner tonight. You too.
He was thrilled, but I couldn't taste a thing. David and the old man, however, seemed like old friends, their glasses clinking frequently as they chatted away, sharing a surprising camaraderie.
Take your time, sir. No need to rush the drinks.
David took good care of the old man, encouraging him to drink at his own pace. But tonight, the old man was in high spirits, downing his drinks with gusto. Eventually, he drank himself into a stupor. We helped him to his room and laid him on the bed. David was very considerate, removing his shoes and wiping his face with great care, as if he was used to doing these things.
You two go home, don't worry about me. Aunt Linda is here to take care of me. Tomorrow, go to the company and deal with those two scoundrels. Go, go!
I glanced at David. You should go home. I need to stay and take care of my dad.
On the first day of our marriage, you want me to sleep alone?
I was taken aback. We're not really together, so what's this about sleeping alone? Are you planning to go back on your word?
Do you want your dad to know we're not really together?
I hesitated. But I can't just leave my dad. He's had too much to drink.
Then we'll both stay.
Fine. You can sleep in the guest room.
How is that any different from me going home alone?
You're not thinking of sleeping in my room, are you?
What else?
I was really at a loss. One room, one bed. How are we supposed to sleep?
I'm a man of my word. As long as you don't agree, I won't touch you.
I glared at him. You'd better keep your word. He smiled, a fleeting look of triumph in his eyes. That night, he was actually quite well behaved, not crossing any boundaries. But somehow, the next morning, I found myself in his arms. I've always had a restless sleep, so I couldn't blame him for it. I figured it was probably me who moved over to him. Oh well, whatever. I tiptoed out of bed and left the room. I changed into my professional attire and headed to MK Company. Today, I was going to get my revenge. Suddenly, I was appointed as the CEO of the company. I felt it essential to greet the professional manager to avoid any impression of abusing my power. As I reached the office door, the secretary intervened.
Mr. Johnson hasn't arrived yet.
I decided to wait in my dad's former office. At 9:30, I returned. Just as I was about to enter, the secretary stopped me once more. She pressed an internal line, seemingly getting the go-ahead, and finally let me in. I was a bit upset. After all, this is my family's company. I respect him, but he doesn't respect me at all. Shouldn't he come to see me first since I was appointed as the CEO? Why is it so difficult for me to meet him? My face uncontrollably darkened as I pushed the door open and walked in. However, when I saw the man in the office, I was stunned and blurted out,
David Miller.
David Miller smiled lightly.
Why didn't you wake me up when you left?
I looked like I had been struck by lightning. No wonder he knew so much about my affairs. It turns out he was the professional manager my dad hired. It's not surprising I didn't know. I've been at my dad's company for less than a month. I usually don't have the chance to come to the top floor. I thought his name sounded familiar. Maybe my dad mentioned it once. He said David was an overseas returnee, highly capable, and that he felt very confident with the company in his hands. So, he and the old man are really close friends despite the age difference. I was both angry and speechless.
Why didn't you say so earlier?
Say what?
Say that you're the Mr. Johnson my dad hired.
I thought you, as a company employee, already knew.
I was at a loss for words, unable to speak for a while. David Miller stood up with a smile, took my hand, and said,
Let's go. Time for the meeting.
At the meeting, David Miller formally introduced me as the new CEO.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your new CEO, Emily Johnson.
Naturally, the room buzzed with whispers. Everyone speculated about my background and why I was given this position, especially Sarah Brown, known for her arrogance, and Michael Smith, who had just been promoted to manager 3 days ago. Both of them looked as if they had seen a ghost, their faces full of shock and bewilderment.
Now that I am here, it's time for them to go.
As the meeting ended, everyone stood up to leave.
Ms. Brown, come to my office.
Sarah Brown looked at me reluctantly, but had no choice but to follow.
Yes.
Once inside my office, I had just taken my seat when Sarah Brown walked in.
Do you know why I called you here?
What reason are you using to dismiss me?
You stepped in with your left foot first when you entered. I don't like it, so you're dismissed.
Firing an employee without cause requires a hefty compensation. My tenure and salary are quite substantial.
Employee misconduct, abuse of power, serious violation of labor discipline, and company regulations. Do I need more reasons to dismiss you?
Pausing for a moment, I added slowly.
Or do you need me to publicize your affair with Michael Smith?
Fine, you win.
She said and walked out. Shortly after she left, there was a knock on the office door.
Come in.
The door opened, and it was Michael Smith. He knew how to read the room. Seeing that I had become the CEO, he immediately walked in with a smile plastered on his face.
Emily, how did you become the CEO?
I looked at him coldly, saying nothing.
I'm sorry, Emily. I was momentarily confused and got seduced by her. Give me another chance, and I promise to love you properly.
Ha! Michael Smith, I told you to get lost, so get lost. Save your disgusting words for Ms. Brown. Maybe she'll save you a bite when she's having soup. Now get out.
Emily, I know I was wrong, but I was seduced by Sarah Brown because I wanted to climb the ladder and improve our lives. I didn't want you to work so hard.
Get out.
Emily Davis thought the matter had come to an end, but a few days later, a post accusing her of being inappropriately favored was circulated in the company group chat. The gist of it was, the reason Emily was parachuted into the CEO position was because she was being favored by the company owner, and that's why an intern like her was given a taste of power. The whole company was in an uproar, and the private group chats were buzzing with gossip. People were criticizing Emily from head to toe.
They weren't entirely wrong. I was indeed taken care of by the company owner, and it had been that way since I was a child.
However, it infuriated David Miller. He found out that it was Sarah Brown and Michael Smith, who had been expelled from a company, who were behind it.
I will use my connections to ensure that these two are blacklisted by almost every company in the industry.
Then he sent an email to the company group.
Let me reintroduce Emily Davis, my wife, and the biological daughter of Chairman Davis. If anyone spreads rumors again, please resign voluntarily.
This powerful email instantly quelled the storm. For every person who was shocked and amazed, there were just as many who were relieved and fearful. When Emily found out it was Sarah Brown and Michael Smith causing trouble again, she didn't hold back.
I will edit the video of me catching them in the act and post it online as my surprise for them.
Of course, the editing wasn't out of kindness. Emily was worried about content moderation issues. The comments were filled with people condemning these two as scum. Sarah Brown and Michael Smith became infamous, known by almost everyone. Emily had altered her voice in the video, but those familiar with her and Michael Smith still recognized that the third person was her.
Even though we had once been in love, reaching this point doesn't bring me much joy.
After the video was posted, many people reached out to show concern, and some even praised Emily. After work in the evening, David Miller knocked on my office door.
Let's go, Mrs. Miller.
Lately, I've been staying at David's place. I had no choice. I couldn't stand my dad's constant nagging, nor could I resist David's persuasive tactics. So I ended up staying at his house. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a moment of peace.
Was looking over a document and responded absent-mindedly.
Just a minute.
David walked over and closed the document for me.
You can look at it tomorrow. Work is never ending.
I was a bit anxious.
But there's always work for tomorrow. You know I'm not very efficient. Don't I need to work harder?
Don't worry, leave these things to your husband.
Without giving me a chance to argue, he pulled me up from my chair and led me out the door. All the employees were watching us as we walked by. I could see the envy in their eyes. And why wouldn't they be envious? This man was successful, mature, steady, and attentive. Compared to Michael Smith, he was 1,000 times better. Accepting him seemed just a matter of time.
When we got home, he changed his clothes and asked what I wanted to eat.
What do you want for dinner?
Tomato and egg noodles.
He put on an apron and headed to the kitchen. This is what touched me the most. When I was with Michael Smith, I was always the one cleaning and cooking. But after being with David, I often felt loved by him. His love wasn't grand or dramatic. It was the way he habitually kept me on the inside of a sidewalk when we walked. It was the warm water he would bring me during my time of the month. It was his insistence on drying my hair when I wanted to sleep with it wet, like a stern parent. These weren't big things, and he never said, "I love you" out loud. But I felt his love in every little detail.
Stood at the kitchen door, watching him, lost in thought.
Am I good to look at?
Yes, very good.
Indeed, he was. Not only was he more handsome than Michael Smith, but his whole demeanor exuded a sharpness that left Michael far behind.
Do you want to eat?
He brought the noodles close to me. His deep eyes seemed to hold a galaxy, making it hard not to get lost in them, making my heart race. But my eyes didn't linger on the noodles for even a second. They were fixed on his light pink lips.
Is it delicious?
He seemed to catch my intention and teased.
Why don't you have a taste?
With that, he leaned in and gently kissed my lips.
How is it?
I tilted my head and blinked.
Not bad.
He seemed encouraged by this. Setting the noodles aside, and with a hint of urgency and a lack of control, he cupped the back of my head and kissed me again. For over a month, we've been sharing the same room and the same bed. According to him, his guest room is filled with clutter and uninhabitable. He then solemnly promised that we would each sleep on our own side and that he would not cross any boundaries. So far, he has indeed behaved like a gentleman. However, tonight, he seemed a bit restless, holding me and showering me with endless kisses and embraces.
Mr. Johnson, a gentleman should keep his word.
Upon hearing this, his dark eyes looked at me in disbelief, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over him. He took a deep breath with all his might.
Hoarse voice. I really want to be a beast right now.
After saying that, he reluctantly got off me and went straight to the bathroom. Watching his awkward retreat, I couldn't help but smile secretly. Perhaps life had been too sweet lately, as I hadn't thought about Michael Smith for a long time. Today, Aunt Linda called to ask if I still wanted to rent out the house. Only then did I remember that I seemed to have forgotten something. The rental house that Michael Smith and I shared was actually my family's property. But my dad didn't want me to reveal my identity, so Aunt Linda always collected the rent as the landlord. Now that I no longer wanted anything to do with Michael Smith, why should I let him stay in my family's house?
Aunt Linda, please evict him first, and I'll follow shortly.
As soon as I arrived at the rental house, I heard Michael Smith's angry voice.
I'm not refusing to pay rent, so why are you making me leave?
Because the owner of the house doesn't want to rent it to you anymore.
What do you mean? Aren't you the landlord? Who's the owner?
I am.
The rental house was a mess, reeking of stale air, with instant noodle boxes, soda cans, dirty socks, and filthy clothes strewn everywhere. It was worse than a pigsty, truly a disgrace to my property. Michael Smith was momentarily stunned upon seeing me, then quickly understood. He took a few quick steps towards me.
Emily.
He reached out to grab my hand, but I dodged, glaring at him sharply.
Stay away from me. You disgust me.
Emily, you can't be so heartless. You made that video of me and Sarah Brown public, and now everyone avoids us. I have no source of income and can't even find a job delivering food. If you kick me out now, I really won't survive.
Oh. And what does that have to do with me? Don't you still have that impressive old lover, Mr. Johnson? Go find her.
She's struggling herself and has already kicked me out. Emily. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I was a jerk for betraying your love. Please, for the sake of our past relationship, give me a chance to survive, okay?
I let out a cold laugh and leaned down slightly.
That reason only makes me want to see you suffer more.
Emily Davis, do you really want to push me to the brink?
Your downfall is not my doing, it's the path you chose. Move out by today, or I'll have someone throw you out.
With that, I turned to leave. Unexpectedly, he suddenly rushed up from behind and grabbed me by the throat. His eyes were bloodshot, and he muttered,
Emily Davis, you forced me to do this, you forced me.
Aunt Linda tried to intervene, but Michael Smith had gone mad, his strength overwhelming. I clawed at his hands, but couldn't break free. My breath grew shallower, and tears streamed from my eyes. Just when I thought I might not survive, someone burst in. Moving swiftly, I only saw a blur before Michael Smith was flung away like a kite, followed by a heavy thud as he hit the ground.
David.
I clutched my throat, coughing uncontrollably, almost believing I would be strangled. After a moment, I saw the man who had come to my aid. A wave of relief and grievance washed over me as I clung to him, sobbing.
David Miller.
It's okay, I'm here.
I nestled into his embrace like a docile cat, feeling a sense of post-crisis relief. Once he saw I had calmed down, David Miller rolled up his sleeves and gave Michael Smith another severe beating, stopping only when Michael was barely conscious.
Michael Smith, do you see now?
Michael Smith ended up with a 3-year prison sentence because of this incident. From that moment on, he completely vanished from my life. Later, I heard from colleagues that Sarah Brown wasn't doing well either. She faced rejection at every company she interviewed with, despite her skills. With David Miller's comprehensive blacklisting and my well-edited video, no one dared to hire her. I couldn't muster any sympathy for her. She brought it upon herself. This incident made me increasingly dependent on David Miller. As the old man put it, I was now being taken care of like a helpless person. Days passed by. One day, 3 months later, I suddenly received a call from Aunt Linda.
Miss, you need to come back quickly. The old man isn't doing well.
What happened to my dad?
Don't ask, just bring your husband to the first hospital to see the old man one last time.
My mind was a blur, and I don't remember how I got to the hospital. When David Miller and I arrived at the ward, the old man was lying on the bed with a breathing machine, his body covered in medical equipment, looking as if life could slip away at any moment.
Dad, what's wrong?
I was so scared that my whole body went weak. I stumbled and fell to my knees by the bedside. I looked him over anxiously, wanting to touch him, but fearing that any touch might hurt him.
What's going on? Old man, what's happened to you? Don't scare me.
The old man raised his hand as if to grasp mine, and I quickly held it. He tried to speak, but couldn't because of the oxygen mask. David Miller stepped forward and removed the mask for him.
Emily.
Dad, Daddy, don't scare me. I'm scared. You're okay, right?
Don't be afraid. David will take care of you for me.
No, no, I need you. Mom's already gone, you can't leave too. You can't be so selfish.
Listen to me.
The old man seemed to muster all his strength. I held back my tears and looked at him.
My body can't hold on anymore. If it could, I wouldn't have rushed you into marriage. David is a good man, and he is always like you. I trust him to take care of you.
But how can you be so unwell? Didn't you say the last checkup was fine?
Aunt Linda, wiping her tears, chimed in.
The old man was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer 2 years ago. He didn't tell you because he didn't want you to worry.
Lung cancer? No, no, how can it be lung cancer? My dad doesn't even smoke.
We went to several hospitals before it was confirmed. The doctor said it was due to a lung infection that led to cancer.
I couldn't accept this reality and cried uncontrollably by the bedside.
No, what will I do if you leave? I can't do it alone. I really can't do it alone.
Don't cry. You've grown up and gotten married. David is the one I chose for you, he won't let you down. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid.
He then looked at David Miller.
David, I'm entrusting my daughter to you.
Dad, don't worry. I will take good care of her.
Good, then I can rest easy.
The old man responded, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. His gaze became distant, and a faint smile appeared on his lips.
Emily, your mom is waiting for me. I have to go find her. You take care.
I clutched my dad's hand and cried out anxiously.
No, you can't break your promise. Dad, Daddy. Daddy.
But no matter how much I called out, the sorrow of losing her father still lingered for Mary. It had been a month, but the pain felt raw. She often found herself crying whenever she saw his belongings.
Sobbing, I don't understand. He was so cheerful, like a Buddha. He never showed any signs of worry. How could he just leave me like this?
She sat on the balcony, tears streaming down her face.
Whispering, maybe I wasn't a good enough daughter. I visited too infrequently. That old man was really heartless, not even giving me a chance to fulfill my duties.
Suddenly, someone gently wiped away her tears.
Softly, don't cry. Your dad didn't tell you because he didn't want you to be sad.
Looking up with tearful eyes, did you know all along?
Nodding, yes.
Accusingly, so, you agreed to marry me out of pity?
Sighing with a mix of helplessness and affection, you really have forgotten everything about me.
Suspiciously, what do you mean?
David sat down behind her and wrapped her in his arms.
15 years ago, your dad took you to a party at the Smiths. I had just been brought back to the family and was being bullied by my siblings. They threw stones at me, and you stood up for me. You were only 8 or 9 years old then.
A smile played on his lips, his eyes full of warmth.
Pointing, oh, you're a little black.
Face darkening, I've gotten lighter since then. I was just tan from being outside.
Laughing, ha ha ha. Yes, now you're tall, handsome, and fair.
Grabbing her hand, I forgot to ask your name back then, and after so many years, it was hard to find you. Later, I ran into your dad at the hospital. He had been diagnosed with a serious illness. I introduced myself and learned about you, but you already had a boyfriend. When I found out your dad was hospitalized, I started visiting him, and we got to know each other. He didn't want you to know about his illness and wasn't happy with your boyfriend. That made me very happy.
Continuing. So, you started being extra attentive?
Chuckling, when else would I be? Your dad mentioned you were still in school, and with him sick, no one was managing the company. He planned to hire a professional manager, so I volunteered and joined your family's company.
Pouting, such a schemer.
Smirking, whatever you say, but admit it, you're mine now, aren't you?
He turned her chin and kissed her hard on the lips, his eyes full of triumph.
Annoyed jerk.
He laughed, his temper as good as ever. Mary wrapped her arms around his neck, her tone more serious.
David, thank you for being there, and thank you for taking care of my dad when I couldn't.
Awkwardly, why say that? You're my wife.
He stood up and brought over a file bag.
Here.
Suspiciously, what's this?
A betrothal gift, my entire fortune.
She looked at the stacks of documents, property deeds, bank cards, and car keys he pulled out, incredulous.
Are these all yours?
Smiling, no. They're all yours now, including me. I love you, my wife.
With that, he cupped her face and kissed her again. Someone who doesn't love you will always think you ask for too much. Someone who loves you will always think they haven't given you enough. The difference between love and indifference is clear. Yet sometimes, people fail to see what's right in front of them.